Let's take a look at 20 sales that I've had in the last 60 days that are more on the higher end, meaning they're $50 or above. I went through my store and I looked and I picked out 20 of the items that I thought, if you're out and about and you're outsourcing, maybe you'll come across these items and you could grab them and know that they're going to sell, and they're going to sell for okay money. So the first item I have is this Kirk Follies necklace. I never learned about Kirk's Folly until this summer. I came across it twice. Once at a church yard sale, I bought 3 tables of jewelry for $50. And then I bought a storage unit this summer and there was a couple pieces in there. This necklace, I finally got around to listing, and as soon as I did, it sold for $50. So don't pass on it if you see it out and about. Next, I have this Ralph Lauren plaid blazer that sold for $50. I got that out of a buyout that I had done where it was filled with vintage Ralph Lauren, a lot of wool pieces. Then I had this 1953 Whitman's chocolate little Easter basket. It's like very thick cardstock. It was on a table at the end of live auction while I was going around auctioneering. I bought it for $1 and it ended up selling for $54. I love selling vintage belts. Love it. And I was at a yard sale this summer and I bought a Tony Lama vintage leather belt, pristine condition. The lady wanted 50 cents for it. They're easy to ship. They usually sell pretty quick. So I grabbed it for 50 cents and I ended up selling it for $55. It's the vintage Pendleton Cruiser jacket. These will always sell. This was not mine. This was on consignment from a couple that's one of my regular auction buyers or customers. And they asked me while I was over their house visiting if I wanted to put this in my store on consignment for them, and I did. So that ended up selling for $70. I will end up taking 25% of that. Then I have this Eddie Bauer coat. This is a tall, large size. I got it out of a bag of free clothing that was given to me that was going to be donated. The reason I listed it is, one, it's Eddie Bauer, so usually they're going to sell. It's in pristine, it's mint condition, like new without tags. And it's also a tall, large. And for online sizing, that's one of those unique sizes. It ended up selling for $70 and I got it for free. Then number 7 is a bag of mixed watches. Well, these were vintage watches that I had sold in an online auction. Buyer didn't pay their invoice. So I take that inventory and then I pump it through the eBay store. In less than an hour, it sold for $80. Number 8 is this Jules Jorgensen Cameo ladies wristwatch. I got this out of a storage unit this summer, and the same storage unit with the Kirk's Folly in it. I normally would have thrown this into just like a box of mixed costume jewelry and sent it through live auction. But I did the sold comps on it on eBay. It was unique enough with the cameos on it that I thought maybe it might have some value to it. I did end up listing it on eBay and it sold, I want to say, in less than a day for $80. Then I had a live on-site auction back in June. One of my buyers came up to me and asked me if I wanted to buy a box of Stephen King hardcover books that they had. He wanted $20. Of course I paid that. And since then I've sold, I believe, all of them. Don't remember how many exactly were in there. I've sold them through eBay and through live auction and also through online high bid auctions. This hardcover book, and it was first edition, I believe. But the coolest thing about this is that it had newspaper clippings inside, folded and tucked inside the cover from 1981. So they were, I think it was a newspaper article written by Stephen King, and then there was a couple about him. It was just crazy to find those in there. That means somebody was an avid Stephen King fan and was literally clipping these articles out of the newspaper and keeping them inside of his books. Now, it's easy for me to find Stephen King because I'm in Maine. It's easy for me to find LL Bean because I'm in Maine. It's easy for me to find New Balance because I'm in Maine. We actually have some great items that we can source in this state because of where we're located. Anytime I go to a book sale or a library sale, I always say, first words out of my mouth when I walk in, you got any Stephen King books? Do you have any books about Maine? Because they both sell really well. That Stephen King book with the clippings inside ended up selling for $90. I had it priced way higher than that. I had many people reach out to me and ask me to send them just photographs of the clippings because they just wanted to read the articles. Well, I wanted them to buy the book. I wasn't going to separate it. I made that clear in the listing. I said I will not separate the clippings from the book. And so it all went as one. And then finally someone bought it. It did get down to $90 though. Then I have this Lee Max collectible house, sold for $90. Bought this at a yard sale 2 weekends ago. A gentleman that buys storage units was having a yard sale. He had like 8 of these buildings in the back. I flipped every single one of them over. There were 4 that were Lemax. I made him an offer of $30 on the 4. They were broken. They had pieces missing. They did not have their original boxes. And I thought $30 was a pretty fair offer. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to sell them. Well, luckily, one of them sold for $90. So I've got my money back. I like to take my costume brooches or my vintage brooches and lot them all up. This lot sold for $100. Most of the time, these brooches and pins will not be marked on the back. They won't be the Monets, Trafaris, Napier, because those pieces, different listing where I sell all of the marked pieces together. So I like to do my costume jewelry as 2 ways, 3 ways actually. Marked lots, unmarked lots, and then junk lots, meaning maybe it's a bunch of broken pieces or one earring without the mate, and it's pretty much for crafters or anybody that's looking for just pieces for their art or whatever. So that's sold by the pounds in bags. These 2 turtle Valentino brooches, they are marked on the back. They came from the same estate. It was a private pick I had earlier this summer. I bought all of the jewelry that they had. I paid one price for everything that I took out of the house. These 2 brooches together sold for $100. I figured it was better to sell them together since they matched. A month ago, some friends of mine who clean out estates contacted me and asked me if I wanted a tote of vintage Hathaway shirts. They don't do much with vintage clothing, but they know that I do. So of course I said yes. I wanted to look at them. They gave them to me for free. They're all brand new old stock. Now Hathaway, it was a shirt factory literally a few towns over. My meme worked there, and so I'm very familiar with the Hathaway shirts. Normally I don't pick them up to flip them because they're kind of like a dime a dozen at thrift stores. They're just button downs, but these ones were all new old stock. They were still all pinned and folded perfectly. They were all the same size, which was important. So instead of listing them individually, I listed them as one lot of 8, and they sold to an international buyer for $100. When I have something like that that's similar but all like the same size, I'm going to group it up because I feel like it sells better that way. Next, I have this LL Bean lamb's wool cardigan sweater.
I realized I was thinking this was a completely different sweater when I was telling you about it, and it's not the actual sweater that sold. So this is a vintage LL Bean camel hair and lamb's wool sweater, and it's a triple win in my book. It's LL Bean tag, it's vintage, and it's the combination of lamb's wool and camel hair, which makes it very, very desirable. That was a men's cardigan, and it sold in the store for $108.
6 of those hardcover Stephen King books out of that $20 buy that I did sold for $125. I sold them all together. I just stacked them up, photographed them, and said, this is how they are. The third Valentino brooch that I had sold came from the same house that I got the other 2 at. This was a frog, and she was a big bitch. She took up pretty much my whole hand, and she ended up selling for $138. Then I had this lot of 70 rings for sale. Tons of interest in it, all costume pieces, nothing that was gold or silver or marked. I had this one mosaic ring. I love selling mosaic vintage jewelry. Usually it's the pins that you find or the brooches, but this was a ring. I had sent a prospective buyer a $40 offer on just the mosaic ring. That person reached out to me and said, if I buy the ring, will you make a deal and combine it with your 70-piece lot that you have? And I said, absolutely. They said, can you make a separate listing for it? Send me the link and I will immediately buy it. And that's exactly how it went down. I made the listing. I added the mosaic and the 70-piece rings together, wrote reserved in the title, immediately went live with it or published it. And I sent that link to that buyer in the message thread that we had going on, and they clicked on it and they bought it. Perfect. Shipped it out the next day. All of those rings together sold for $230. Storage unit that I bought, threw 50 plus purses away. At the end of the day, I made hundreds on that unit and not thousands like I could have, but the conditions in the unit were so bad. The smell was awful, but there was one purse that was stuck in between. It was like folded and crammed in between a bunch of other things in one of the bags, and for some reason it was spared in this odor that was in this unit, which shocked me. And thank God, because it helped get my money back. It ended up selling for $288. It's this Juicy Couture, very Y2K purse. Everybody had them back in the early 2000s. Not me. Well, not my style. But I know many people that did. The 19th item that I want to show you is 140 pieces of signed vintage costume jewelry. And when I say signed, I'm talking Monet, Trifari, Coro, Napier, all of those. I'm looking for those when I'm outsourcing and when I'm buying jewelry in bulk. I'm pulling those pieces out and setting them aside to create their own listing. And this 140 pieces sold for $700 to a repeat buyer. I have this one person that keeps buying all of my lots of signed costume jewelry, and they buy it usually within an hour or 2 or 3 of me listing it. So I know that they must have me saved in their search to be notified when this type of item is listed. The highest priced item I sold in the last 60 days was a combat knife that I took on consignment, but then I decided not to take any commission from it. And it sold for $1,100. And the reason I did not take anything from this sale and I gave it all the money to the seller was because their item brought so much traffic to my store, and I recognize that as a marketing technique. So I take advantage of the fact that I have this unique item that a lot of people are going to be interested in. He did pay $400 for that knife, but I sold it for $1,100 for him. So, and his second knife is still in the store for, I believe, $1,200 or $1,300 at this point. So there's 20 of the over $50 sales since the last 2 months, and hopefully it's just going to continue. The store is definitely growing, and I appreciate all the support. Today is the 1-year anniversary of my YouTube channel starting, so I'm excited about that because that took years and years and years for me to finally act on that. And I hopefully that will just continue to grow. But follow my journey as a female auctioneer. I live auction items every other Monday morning in Skowhegan, Maine, and we sell antiques and vintage and collectibles and furniture and jewelry, and you name it, we sell it. Thank you. Like the video, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day.